Look at me. Now, really, look at the cracked iron, the ash clinging to my skin. I am, or, well, I was, the Knight of Reason. For the longest time, I honestly thought I was protecting the realm, standing as this unyielding bulwark against the darkness. But as we're going to explore in today's explainer, the violence that tore me apart wasn't some random attack from the outside. No, it was a terrifying, completely unholy transvaluation of my entire existence. So let's dive into this dark, Fichtean fable of psychological destruction and figure out what actually happens when the structures we build to keep us safe become the exact things killing us. This realization hit me like a ton of bricks as I was physically pulling myself out of the burning wreckage of my own armor. I remember thinking, the volcanic emergence of the hidden fire did not slay me. It initiated a terrifying, unholy transvaluation of my entire existence. I was suddenly standing in the middle of absolute nihilism. The moral safety net I had clung to for so long, a complete, utter lie. My highly structured world was being forced right into the crucible. I had to face the abyss head-on, and in doing so, I realized my entire worldview was nothing but an illusion.
That brings us to Section 1, our thesis, the Apollonian Facade. This was my former self in a nutshell. A rigid, uncompromising structure meticulously built for one purpose: to keep the primal darkness at bay. It was the absolute epitome of Nietzsche's slave morality. This absolute morality that sanctifies weakness and demonizes our primal instincts just to maintain a nice, safe, predictable facade. That was me. My Apollonian armor wasn't some righteous defense. Actually, it was the literal manifestation of the Nietzschean shadow. I was engaging in a totally sterile denial of life, pretending it was piety, and hiding behind dogma just to suppress my own raw vitality. What I absolutely failed to realize is that total safety is a slow death. It really is. My Apollonian drive for order, my sheer obsession with absolute law, it literally became a tomb. Without the vitalizing, dangerous fire of the Dionysian abyss to balance it out, I was suffocating inside my own defenses. The kingdom I protected had become completely docile, stagnant. I was dying from the inside out, smothered by the very rules I had sworn to uphold.
So naturally, we hit Section 2, the antithesis, the Dionysian shadow.
My incredibly rigid thesis basically demanded an opposing force. Nature abhors stagnation, right? And so the Crimson Jester arrived. But here's the wild part. He wasn't my enemy. He was my Jungian shadow. He was the literal return of my repressed, primal, master morality, acting through this chaotic will to confront the irrational abyss I'd spent my life burying. He didn't show up to conquer the kingdom. He came to completely shatter the fragile, artificial illusions I used to define good as something static and harmless. He forced me to look right at the chaos. So picture this clash. On one side, you have the Knight of Reason, completely bound by Apollonian illusions, static laws, and these sterile linguistic constructs. And on the other side, the Crimson Jester, wielding Dionysian truth, chaotic violence, and just raw primal will. When you view this through the lens of absolute nihilism, that terrifying realization that there is no inherent objective meaning out there in the universe, I finally saw the truth. My absolute morality and his chaotic violence were inextricably linked. I was the constructed illusion. He was the raw, unvarnished reality that I flat out refused to integrate. Which pulls us into Section 3, the philological abyss. Down in this abyss, the very words I used to govern my reality literally burned away. Under my old slave morality, the concept of good versus evil was just a tool to control people and keep them pacified. But as this molten power poured from my chest, those words completely lost their moralistic weight. They reverted to their archaic, noble origins. Suddenly, good no longer meant being obedient and meek. It meant being strong, vital, and life-affirming. And bad didn't mean sinful anymore. It meant weak, cowardly, and stagnant. The entire foundation of my judgment was stripped totally bare. And that triggers Section 4, the collapse of absolute morality.
I will never, ever forget it. It was, in Nietzsche's terms, a brutal smashing of old tablets. Because I had stubbornly refused to integrate my Jungian shadow, my repressed nature couldn't just emerge peacefully. No way! It burst forth with volcanic force. The jester's violence was the hammer that shattered the fragile iron protections of my ego. It was an agonizing psychological death. All my dogmatic ideals, my neat little static definitions of right and wrong, utterly smashed. All to clear the path for a much deeper, much darker reality. Out of that destruction, we get Section 5, Synthesis, the Crimson Rebirth. From that horrific destruction came this dark,
Dionysian dance right across the ashes of my old life. Think of it as a three-step process. Step 1 was the volcanic emergence of Dionysus, the completely unavoidable eruption of my hidden fire. Step 2 was the incineration of my linguistic constructs, finally stripping away all the comforting lies of slave morality. And step 3, absorption. You see, the hidden fire didn't slay me. Instead, I absorbed the jester's chaotic violence into myself. I went through psychological death to shed my artificial ego, merging the thesis of my reason with the antithesis of his chaos. I integrated. And right at that climax, the Crimson Jester's malicious grin actually contorted into a mask of solemn reverence. In that exact moment, witnessing my transformation, the archetypal shadow recognized that his chaotic work was finally complete. We no longer clashed as mortal enemies. This grim union we formed, it's the ultimate parable of psychological integration and spiritual transcendence. The chaos had absolutely served its purpose. It woke me up to my own terrifying potential. Which brings us to our final section, the dawn of the Übermensch. Stepping out from the burning wreckage, I stood resurrected, a monstrous synthesis of reason and chaos. I am now a sovereign individual, possessing the terrifying strength required to destroy old values so that I can actually create new ones. I still wear the cracked armor of reason, sure, but now I harbor the wild, creative flame of chaos right inside it. Unbound by divine decree or societal guilt, I'm driven entirely by the self-justifying will to power. True mastery isn't about playing it safe. It's life measured solely by its capacity to endure and command its own chaos. So, I want to leave you with a question directly from the edge of the moral abyss. Your Apollonian armor is cracking. Will you let the hidden fire consume you, or will you forge yourself anew? We all have a crimson jester waiting in the wings, and we all hide behind sterile constructs. When your absolute morality inevitably collapses, are you going to be destroyed by your oppressed shadow, or will you endure the psychological death required to truly transcend? Think about it. Thanks for exploring the dark with me today in this explainer.